Every house, every king, and every battle has its own truth. But there are stories older than crowns, darker than the night, and more dangerous than any blade. They were never written in books. They were whispered to fire, to the trees, and to the dead gods. And today, we dare to uncover one of them. In the dim and ancient north, when the stars hung lower and the world was still young, men whispered of heroes who walked beside giants and spoke with the children of the forest. The long night had not yet come, but shadows were already stirring beyond the frostfangs, and men still measured courage by how long they could stare into the dark before looking away. Among the wolf clans of the Wolfswood, there lived a boy named Edric, the youngest son of Harlan's bondmen. His people once roamed freely beneath the tall oaks, hunting deer and trading furs with the clans of the hills. But freedom was a fading dream. For 3 winters past, the tyrant King Harlan of the Rills had conquered the Wolfswood, claiming its streams and valleys for himself. His men had burned the sacred groves, broken the clanstones, and taken Edric's kin as thralls. Edric was small for his age, but his eyes were sharp and bright, like the glint of starlight on cold steel. He carried an old bronze knife his father had given him before the chains closed around their people. When Harlan's men came again to take the year's due in hides and young men, Edric fled into the woods, guided by the whisper of wind through the leaves. He wandered for 3 days and 3 nights, cold and half-starved, until he came to a clearing bathed in moonlight. At its center stood a weirwood, pale as bone, its red leaves like tears frozen in mid-fall. Beneath it sat a small figure, neither man nor beast, her eyes golden and bright, her hair like moss threaded with silver. She watched him without fear. "Who are you?" Edric asked, though his voice trembled. "I am Leaf," she said, her voice soft as running water. "You are far from your kind, little wolf." "I've no kind left," Edric said bitterly. "They're slaves now, bound to a man who calls himself king." Leaf tilted her head, her gaze unreadable. "You wish to free them?" Edric hesitated. "Aye, but I'm only one boy. What can I do against a king with iron and fire?" The child of the forest rose and touched her hand to the weirwood's bark. "Long before your kind came from across the sea, there was a weapon forged in the heart of the earth. A sword born not of metal, but of will, the sword of freedom. With it, a man may break any chain if his heart is pure." Edric frowned. "Where is this sword?" "Hidden," Leaf said, "beneath roots older than time. The children buried it, for men's hearts are quick to hunger, but the forest remembers its place. If you seek it truly, it will find you." He wanted to believe her, though the tale sounded like the old stories his father used to tell beside the hearth. But the thought of his people bent under Harlan's lash burned in him like a fire that would not die. "Tell me where to start," he said. Leaf's golden eyes glimmered. "Follow the river north until it turns black with peat. There you will find the Barrow of Kings where the old ones sleep. The sword's first whisper lies there. But beware, Edric of the Wolfswood. Others hunt the same prize, and not all chains are made of iron." Before he could speak again, she was gone, vanished like mist at dawn. Only the rustle of leaves answered him. The next morning, Edric set out along the riverbank. The air was sharp, smelling of pine and frost. He traveled light, his knife, a cloak of wolfskin, and a pouch of dried meat. For days he followed the current, sleeping under roots and stars, his thoughts turning again and again to the weirwood and its strange messenger. By the 5th night, he reached the moorlands, where the land rolled out like waves of gray stone. In the distance rose a mound half swallowed by time, the Barrow of Kings. Mist clung to it, and the air was heavy with silence. As he drew near, he saw carvings in the stones, faces worn smooth by wind and rain, eyes that once might have seen the dawn of the first men. A narrow arch led into the darkness below. Edric lit a torch and stepped inside. The barrow was deep, the walls slick with moss. He passed hollow tombs where bones lay tangled in rusted mail. The air grew colder. Somewhere ahead, he thought he heard whispering, faint, like breath through reeds. "Who disturbs our sleep?" a voice murmured. Edric froze. The torchlight flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to move. "I seek the sword of freedom," he said, his voice shaking, "to free my people from a tyrant." The whisper became laughter, soft and ancient. Freedom. Many have spoken that word. Few have known its cost. The ground shuddered. From the dark rose a shape of stone and bone, a giant figure clad in cracked bronze, its eyes hollow flames. It raised a broken sword and stepped toward him. Edric's instinct screamed to flee, but he stood his ground. "I'm not here to steal from the dead," he cried. "I came to learn how to fight for the living." For a long moment, the barrow was silent. Then the figure stopped. The flame in its eyes dimmed. "Then fight not for vengeance," it said, its voice fading like dust. "Fight for the chain that binds all, life to life, heart to heart. The sword you seek is not buried here, but your path begins in courage. Remember that." The figure crumbled to dust. Where it had stood, something gleamed faintly, a shard of crystal, smooth and cool to the touch. Edric took it, feeling a strange warmth pulse through his palm. When he emerged into the night, the mist had lifted. The stars burned bright above him, and though he did not yet know it, his journey, and the fate of more than one realm, had truly begun. The dawn came pale and cold over the moors, painting the mist in streaks of silver and rose. Edric wrapped his cloak tighter about his shoulders and studied the crystal shard in his hand. It pulsed faintly, as though it had a heartbeat of its own. When he turned it toward the rising sun, he saw within it a faint shimmer, the shape of a sword, faint as a reflection in water, waiting to be made whole. He did not know how or why it had come to him, only that it felt alive. The words of the Barrow Guardian echoed in his mind. "Fight for the chain that binds all, life to life, heart to heart." Edric tucked the shard close to his chest and started north. His boots sank into the wet peat, and frost glazed his hair, but he did not slow. Somewhere ahead, beyond the rolling hills, lay the Rills, the land of King Harlan, his father's captor. Yet Leif had spoken of another test before the sword would reveal itself. The road between them wound through wild country where the old gods still lingered. By nightfall, Edric reached the edge of a black pine forest. The trees grew close together, their trunks straight and tall as pillars, their needles whispering secrets to the wind. A strange stillness clung to the place. Even the wolves were silent. He built a small fire and ate the last of his meat. As he settled to rest, the crystal shard stirred again, glowing faintly in rhythm with his heartbeat. And then he heard it, a faint crack of a branch, footsteps too careful to be made by any beast. He rose at once, knife drawn. "Show yourself," he said into the darkness. A woman stepped into the firelight. Her cloak was of black fur, her hair dark as the forest shadows, her eyes bright and watchful. She bore no sigil, only a long sword at her hip. "You travel far for one so young," she said. Her voice was smooth, almost kind, yet there was steel beneath it. "I travel for those who cannot," Edric replied, keeping the fire between them. "Who are you?" "A wanderer," she said with a faint smile. "A seeker of truths buried in the bones of this land. My name is Miria Rivers." The name stirred faint memory. One of the hedge magicians who had once served the lords of the Trident whispered of in tales told by firesides. "You're one of the sorcerers," he said cautiously. Miria's eyes glinted. "Once. Now I serve only the old powers. Tell me, boy, do you know what it is you carry?" Edric's hand went to his pouch instinctively. "A shard," he said. "Nothing more." She laughed softly. "A shard, he calls it. Do you think the children would let such a thing rest among the dead if it were nothing? That piece is part of something far greater, a key to the power your kind was never meant to wield." "I seek only to free my kin," Edric said, "not power." "Freedom is power," she said, stepping closer. "And power has its price. The sword you seek was forged from the life of a god. To claim it, one must be willing to give something in return. A soul for a soul, a life for a life." Edric's grip on the knife tightened. "You speak like Harlan, all chains and bargains. I want no part in that." Her smile faded. "Then you will die like the others who tried. The sword answers only those who understand sacrifice." Before he could speak again, she turned and vanished into the darkness, leaving only the echo of her voice. Edric slept little that night. Miria's words gnawed at him. A life for a life. His father's face came to him in dreams, bound in chains, his eyes dim with weariness. Would freedom demand more than courage? At dawn, he followed the forest northward. By midday, the trees thinned, giving way to rocky ground and cold winds sweeping off the sea. Ahead lay the cliffs of the rills, jagged and gray, and at their crest rose King Harlan's Hall, built of stone and driftwood, crowned with banners of black and blue. Edric crept closer, watching from the shadows. The king's men were everywhere, hard-eyed reavers in ringmail, their swords stained with old rust. He saw among them faces he knew, men from his own clan, now servants in their conqueror's house. And there, in the yard, his father knelt beside the forge, hammering shackles into shape. The sight struck Edric like a blow. His heart thundered with fury and helplessness. That night, beneath a sky choked with cloud, he slipped down toward the outer wall. He knew the risk, but the pull to see his father, to speak with him, was too strong to ignore. He waited for the watchfire to dim, then climbed the stone face and dropped into the courtyard. He found his father alone by the forge, the fire's glow reflecting in his weary eyes. When the old man looked up and saw him, the hammer fell from his hand. "Edric," he whispered hoarsely, "by the old gods, boy, what are you doing here?" "I came to free you," Edric said. "All of you. I've found something, a way to break Harlan's chains." His father's face twisted with grief and fear. "You should have stayed hidden. Harlan's reach is long, and his wrath longer. A shout cut him off. Guards were running toward them, torches blazing. "Run!" his father cried. "Go, Edric!" But it was too late. Rough hands seized him, wrenched the knife from his grip. He fought, kicked, shouted, but they dragged him through the yard like a caught beast. When they threw him before the high seat, King Harlan rose slowly. He was a great bear of a man, his hair streaked with gray, his eyes cold and cunning. "A wolf pup come to my door," he said, and with a spark of rebellion in his teeth, "Tell me, boy, who set you to this?" "No one," Edric spat. "I came from my father." The king studied him for a long moment, then laughed. "Brave but foolish. I might have use for you yet. The children whisper to some, and you look like one they'd favor. Tell me where they hide and I'll spare your kin." Edric said nothing. Harlan's face hardened. "Very well. Break him. Then chain him beside his father. Let him learn what freedom costs." As they dragged him away, Edric caught one last glimpse of the king's hall, the carved weirwood faces in the rafters, staring down with pity. He was thrown into a cold stone cell, the smell of damp and iron thick in the air. Hours passed, or perhaps days. He lost count, but one night, as the wind howled outside, he heard a faint voice through the darkness. "Edric," it whispered. "The forest remembers." He looked up, and there, in the cracks of the wall, the moss began to glow, soft green light curling into the shape of a face. Leaf's golden eyes shone through the stone. "Do not lose heart," she said. "The sword watches. The chains will break, but only when you understand what it means to be bound." Before he could reply, the light faded, and he was alone once more. Yet something stirred within him, not despair, but a fierce and quiet hope. For the first time, he understood that freedom was not the absence of chains, but the courage to bear them until the right moment came to break them. And that moment was drawing near. The days that followed were long and cruel. Edric awoke each morning in the dark beneath Harlan's hall, chained to the damp stones of his cell. The guards gave him little water and less bread. His wrists bled where the manacles rubbed raw, but he never cried out. The flame inside him, though small, did not die. It burned quietly, feeding on his fury and his faith in the promise Leaf had made. Sometimes, when the torches guttered and the hall above was silent, Edric thought he heard whispers in the walls, faint voices murmuring in the old tongue, older than the first men. Once, when he pressed his ear against the cold stone, he could have sworn he heard the rustle of leaves, though no tree grew for miles around. The forest, he thought. The forest remembers. On the 7th night, the guards came for him. They dragged him through the corridors of the keep to a chamber lit by a great hearth. Smoke curled toward the rafters, and on a table near the fire lay his father's hammer, the one used to forge chains. King Harlan sat beside it, a goblet in his hand, his eyes glinting like blue ice. "You've been silent long enough," the king said. "I've had patience, boy. But patience is not a virtue I possess in great measure. Tell me, where do the children hide?" "I don't know," Edric answered, voice hoarse but steady. Harlan leaned forward. "You were seen in the moors. My scouts found the remains of the barrow of kings disturbed. Did they whisper to you, those forest demons? Did they give you what they promised?" Edric said nothing. The king's smile faded. He rose, slow as a wolf scenting prey, and took the hammer in his hand. "Do you know what this is, boy? This tool made your father's chains, and now it will teach you truth." But before he could strike, the door burst open. One of the guards stumbled in, pale and panting. "My king, the woods are moving." Harlan frowned. "What nonsense is this?" "The trees, my lord. The trees themselves. The forest comes to the walls." A cold wind swept through the hall, and from far away came a sound like the groaning of 1,000 boughs bending under weight, unseen. Edric felt the shard hidden beneath his tunic grow warm. "Take him below," Harlan roared, seizing his sword. "Double the watch." But chaos had already taken root. The hall trembled as if the earth itself had begun to breathe. Through the window slits came cries of fear, and beyond them, a whispering that grew into a roar, leaves and branches thrashing like a storm, though the air was still. In the confusion, the guard holding Edric's chain dropped his grip. The young man lunged, wrenching the chain around the man's throat. With a fierce twist, he brought him down, snatched his keys, and freed himself. He had no time to think. Smoke curled through the corridors. The torches were dying, smothered by unseen winds. He ran through the dark, his feet pounding on the stone until he came again to the forge. His father was there, bound to the anvil, eyes wide with shock. "Father!" "Edric, gods be good, what?" But there was no time for words. The roof above groaned as stones cracked. Edric struck the chains loose with the fallen hammer, each blow echoing through the hall like thunder. When the last link snapped, the ground beneath them shuddered and split. "Run!" Edric shouted. They fled through the side passage, smoke and dust swirling around them. The air grew colder as they neared the outer wall. Through the cracks in the stones, Edric saw movement, roots twisting through the earth like serpents, tearing at the foundations. The forest was indeed alive. They broke into the courtyard. Men were screaming, torches flaring in panic. Branches burst through the gates, sweeping soldiers aside like straw. The sky above was black with storm clouds, yet a strange green light flickered beneath the clouds, as though the stars themselves burned behind a veil. At the heart of it stood a figure, small, slender, her golden eyes bright in the darkness. Leaf. Edric's breath caught. She raised her hand, and the roots stilled. "Come," she called, her voice carrying clear above the chaos. "The forest calls you home." Harlan's men turned toward her, swords drawn, but the roots lashed again, dragging them screaming into the ground. Edric pulled his father toward the gate. They ran together through the ruin of the yard, the great oaken doors torn from their hinges. When they reached the tree line, Leaf was waiting. Her gaze passed over Edric's father and softened with pity. "He is broken," she said, "but not beyond healing." Edric fell to his knees, breathless. "You came for me." "The forest does not forget its children," Leaf said quietly. "But now the king's wrath will follow. You cannot stay here. You must finish what you began." She touched her fingers to his chest, over the place where the shard rested. It glowed once, bright as sunrise. "The sword stirs," she murmured, "but its heart is not yet whole. You must seek the second piece, in the lands of the rivers, where stone and blood mingle. There you will find another who dreams of freedom, though not as you do." Edric looked back toward the burning hall. "And Harlan? He will live," Leaf said, her voice colder now. "The gods do not take him yet. His pride will drive him to hunt you across the north. But remember, young wolf, chains do not end with the breaking of iron. Some are woven of fear, and those are the hardest to sever." His father stirred weakly beside him. "Go, my son. I'll not slow you. My time's near done." "No," Edric said, grasping his hand. "We go together." Leaf's gaze lingered on them both, unreadable. "Then hurry. Dawn will bring men from every holdfast to Harlan's call. The forest will shield you only for a little while." The roots withdrew, parting the path ahead. Edric helped his father to his feet, and together they followed the faint trail lit by the shard's glow. Behind them, the flames of Harlan's hall rose high, reflected in the dark water of the rills. They walked through the night, the sound of the sea fading behind them. The forest thinned, giving way to high ridges and deep vales where rivers wound like silver threads through the mist. By the time dawn broke, Edric's father could walk no more. They rested by a stream, the water cold and clean. The old man's eyes were heavy with sorrow. "You've done what I could not," he whispered. "You've broken your chains. But listen to me, Edric. Freedom is not a gift. It is a burden you must carry for others. I'll carry it, Edric promised. His father smiled faintly, then closed his eyes. The forest was silent, but for the whisper of water over stone. When Edric rose at last, the shard in his hand burned brighter than ever. He turned his face toward the east, where the rivers met the rising sun, and behind him, the wind through the trees sounded almost like a voice, whispering, "Go on, little wolf. The sword waits." The rivers ran wide and wild in that country, their waters swollen by spring melt from the mountains. Edric followed their course for many days, the land changing around him from dark forest to open hills, green with grass and scattered with standing stones that marked the graves of forgotten kings. Ravens watched from their perches, and once, far off, he saw the shimmer of a great elk moving among the mist. The shard guided him. It pulsed faintly at night, pointing ever eastward, as though drawn by some unseen force. He walked until his boots split, and his cloak was heavy with rain. When hunger gnawed, he trapped small game and cooked it over a hidden fire. He spoke little, though sometimes he found himself whispering to the shard as if it could hear. "You're not just steel," he thought once, turning it over in his palm. "You're something alive, aren't you?" It gave no answer, yet a faint warmth spread through his fingers as if in silent reply. By the 10th day, he reached the confluence of two great rivers, the Blue Fork and the Green. There, upon a rise above the water, stood a keep of gray stone, its towers half collapsed and overgrown with ivy. Smoke rose from its hearths, but the banners that fluttered on its walls were tattered and sun-faded, a silver fish on a field of blue. "The River Lords," Edric murmured, remembering his father's tales. They once ruled half the Vale before they turned on each other. He approached cautiously. The gates hung open, and within he found a small camp of armed men, outlaws by their look, hard and lean, with eyes that measured every stranger as a foe until proven otherwise. Their leader stood near the gate, tall and broad-shouldered, a scar running from his temple to his jaw. "Hold there, traveler," the man said. "You've the look of a stray wolf. Name yourself." "Edric of the Wolfswood," he answered. "I seek shelter and a fire to share. I can pay with work or with skill at arms." The scarred man's eyes narrowed. "The Wolfswood? That's Harlan's country. You one of his dogs?" "I was his prisoner," Edric said flatly. "No man's dog." A murmur ran through the outlaws. The leader studied him a long moment, then nodded once. "Very well. You'll find no friends of Harlan here. I am Torrin Pike, captain of the Free Blades. Eat if you've coin. Work if you've none." That night, Edric sat by their fire and listened to their talk. They were a band of dispossessed, men who had fled the rule of cruel lords, women who had lost their kin to raids or famine. They called themselves free, though they fought for food more often than for gold. Torrin watched Edric closely as he ate. "You carry something strange, boy," he said at last. "That bit of light in your cloak. What is it?" Edric hesitated, but saw no deceit in the man's face. He drew out the shard. Its glow was faint, yet it drew the eyes of all around the fire. Torrin leaned closer. "By the gods, that's no common trinket." "It's part of a sword," Edric said quietly. "A sword that can break any chain? I seek the rest of it." The outlaws exchanged uneasy looks. Torrin gave a low whistle. "You've the look of one chasing legends. What do you mean to do with such a blade?" "Free my people," Edric said simply. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Torrin's laughter broke the silence, not mocking, but weary. "Freedom, a fine word. Every man here sought it once. Yet look at us, thieves and beggars, free only in our hunger." "Then you've forgotten what freedom means," Edric said. That silenced him. At last, Torrin nodded slowly. "You've fire in you, boy. I'll give you that. But fire burns bright only so long as it's fed. If you mean to chase this sword, you'll need more than courage. The rivers hide old things, dark things. North of here lies the stone maze, built by the Greenseers before the dawn. Some say the old gods still whisper beneath its stones. If your sword's ghost lives anywhere, it will be there." Edric thanked him and rose to leave at dawn, but Torrin stopped him. "I'll not have you die alone. I've seen too many fools vanish into that cursed place. I'll come with you." So the two set out together, the young wolf and the weary outlaw. They followed the river north, where the hills grew steep and the ground turned to slate. By the third day, they reached a valley hemmed in by cliffs, and there they found it. A labyrinth of standing stones, black with age, carved with faces long worn to shadows. No bird sang within that valley. The air itself felt heavy. "The stone maze," Torrin said, his voice low. "Best we go by daylight." But the moment they entered, twilight fell as if the sun had been swallowed. The path wound endlessly, each turn leading into deeper shadow. Strange lights flickered between the stones, ghostly blue and green, like moonlight on water. "Stay close," Edric warned. They walked for what felt like hours. At times, the stones seemed to shift when they looked away, their faces twisting, mouths opening as if to whisper. Then, without warning, Torrin cried out. Edric spun and saw his companion vanish through the ground as if the earth itself had swallowed him. "Torrin!" He ran forward, but the stone beneath his feet gave way, and he fell, tumbling into darkness. When he awoke, he lay upon smooth black rock. Faint light seeped from the walls, revealing carvings of roots and leaves, and at the far end of the chamber stood an altar of crystal. Upon it rested a sword hilt, wrought in silver and bone. The shard at Edric's chest blazed, pulling toward it. He rose unsteadily, and as he reached the altar, a voice filled the air, cold, echoing, like wind through hollow trees. "Another seeker comes, another heart bound by chains unseen." A shadow took form before him, shaped like a man, but made of mist and moonlight. Its eyes were deep and empty. "I seek the sword of freedom," Edric said, "to break the bonds of tyranny." "Freedom?" the shadow whispered. "You name it easily. But what will you give for it? The sword cuts both ways. To free one soul, another must be bound." Edric hesitated. "That is no freedom." "Then you understand little," the voice said, drifting closer. "The sword's power is balance. Every chain sundered must be reforged elsewhere. To wield it, you must bear that weight." The hilt began to tremble, its light flaring. The shard in his hand lifted of its own accord, drawn to join it. "Wait!" Edric cried, but it was too late. The shard fused to the hilt with a sound like ringing steel, and the chamber filled with blinding light. When the glare faded, he was alone. The hilt lay whole once more, but the blade was still absent, a sword without edge, waiting for its final piece. From the shadows came a groan. Torrin lay nearby, pale but alive. 7 hells. What happened? Edric sheathed the hilt at his belt. The sword spoke. He said quietly. It asked for sacrifice. Torrin's gaze met his. "And what did you answer?" "That I would not trade one chain for another," Edric said. For a moment, the older man said nothing. Then he smiled faintly. A rare answer in this world. As they left the stone maze, dawn broke over the valley. Edric looked eastward, where the rivers gleamed like veins of silver. Somewhere beyond them, he knew, lay the final piece and the truth of what the sword truly was. But behind them, unseen among the stones, shadows stirred, and a woman's voice, soft and cruel, whispered through the wind, "He will come to me, in the end." It was Miria Rivers, and she was not far behind. They journeyed east beneath low gray skies, the wind cutting through their cloaks and carrying with it the scent of rain and iron. The rivers broadened, crawling like serpents through the mist, their surfaces broken only by the drift of dead leaves and branches. Torrin led the way along a narrow deer track that wound through marshland and low willows. Edric followed in silence, the hilt of the broken sword hidden beneath his cloak. Neither spoke much of what had passed in the stone maze, though both felt the weight of it pressing between them. The hilt's faint light pulsed against Edric's chest, steady and warm, but he could not shake the words of the shadow. To free one soul, another must be bound. By the fourth day, they reached higher ground. Ahead rose the ruins of an old stronghold, its towers blackened by fire and long abandoned. Torrin studied it warily. "Stonehelm," he said, "once held by the river lords before the wars burned them out. We'll find shelter there." The place stank of old smoke and wet stone. Moss crawled over the walls, and the gate hung crooked on its hinges. They made camp in the shadow of the hall, where the roof still held against the rain. As Torrin gathered wood for the fire, Edric wandered among the ruins. He found the remnants of a great hearth, its carvings half buried beneath rubble. There, under the soot, he saw a sigil, a tree bound in chains. He brushed the dirt away, frowning. The symbol felt wrong, like a wound left unhealed. When he returned to the fire, Torrin was sharpening his sword. "You look troubled," the older man said. "That mark on the hearth? Who would bind a tree in chains?" Torrin's jaw tightened. The River Kings did. They called it their sign of strength, man's dominion over nature. But the old gods never forgave them for it. It said their bloodlines withered soon after. Edric gazed into the fire. Maybe they were meant to wither. No man rules the roots of the world. The wind howled through the ruins, and the flames shuddered. Torrin smiled faintly. "You speak like a child of the forest. Careful. Some men would hang you for less." Edric almost laughed, but the sound died in his throat. In the flicker of the firelight, he thought he saw movement beyond the fallen gate. A flicker of pale hair, a glimmer of gold eyes. He rose at once, drawing the bronze knife he still carried. "Torrin," he said softly, "we're not alone." Shapes moved in the mist, tall, cloaked figures, their faces hidden. The fire hissed as they approached. 5, 6, perhaps more. Their leader stepped forward, her voice smooth and cold. "I told you, boy, freedom demands its price." Miria Rivers. Edric's heart clenched. She looked changed since he last saw her, older, wearier, yet her eyes still burned with that strange light. At her back stood men in armor dark as night, their sigils scratched away. Torrin drew his blade. "You've a poor sense of courtesy, witch." Miria's smile was faint. "Courtesy is a chain like any other. You should know, Captain. Your men once swore to me before they swore to you." At her gesture, 2 of the dark-cloaked men lowered their hoods. Edric recognized them. Faces from Torrin's camp, men who had sat beside their fire days ago. "Traitors," Torrin snarled. "They seek the same freedom you do," Miria said. "Freedom from hunger, from fear, from death, and I will grant it to them." Her gaze turned to Edric. "You've found the hilt, the second piece. Give it to me, and I'll show you mercy." Edric's hand went to his cloak, but he did not draw the sword. You said mercy once before. I remember how it sounded. Miria's eyes darkened. Then you remember poorly. I seek to finish what your kind began, to free the green seers, trapped in their trees since the dawn. The sword can break that bond, if only it's made whole. Don't you see? I fight for freedom too. For them, perhaps, Edric said. Not for us. Freedom is not yours alone, boy, she hissed. It belongs to all who are bound, even the gods themselves. Torrhen stepped forward, his blade glinting in the firelight. You'll have to cut him down first. The air rippled. Miria raised her hand, and the mist itself seemed to move, coiling around her like living smoke. Then the fight began. The traitors rushed in, blades drawn. Torrhen met them with a roar, his sword flashing through the haze. Steel rang on steel and blood splashed the stones. Edric ducked beneath a blow and drove his knife into a man's ribs. The shard at his chest blazed brighter, flooding the ruins with light. Miria flinched back, her spell faltering. "What are you doing?" she cried. Edric could feel something stirring within him, a strength not his own. The light spread through his limbs, and his voice came low and steady. "You spoke of bonds, sorceress. Let this one be broken." He tore the hilt free and thrust it toward her. Light burst forth, white and fierce. The mist shattered like glass, and Miria was thrown backward, crashing against the stones. When the glare faded, she was gone. Only the sound of the rain remained. Torrhen staggered, breathing hard, his blade dripping red. "By the gods," he muttered. "What in seven hells was that?" Edric sank to his knees, trembling. "I don't know, but the sword answered me." He looked down. The hilt now glowed softly, and in its light he saw something new. Faint runes burned along its surface, like veins of silver. They spelled no words he knew, yet somehow he understood their meaning. One chain broken, one life spared. "She lives," he whispered. "I didn't kill her." Torrhen glanced toward the darkness beyond the walls. "Then she'll come again. Witches don't die easy." They buried the dead at dawn and left Stonehelm behind. For 2 days they traveled through the rain, saying little. The shard no longer glowed as before, but Edric could feel its pull, eastward still, toward the highlands beyond the rivers. On the third night, they camped beneath a willow by the water's edge. Torrhen sat polishing his sword, his movements slow. "You know," he said at last, "I never believed in such tales. Magic, old gods, swords that think. But after what I saw..." He trailed off, staring into the dark. "What will you do when you find the last piece?" Edric hesitated. "I'll set my people free." "And after that?" "I don't know." Torrhen nodded slowly. "Then pray that you never do. Freedom's a fine dream, lad, but it leaves a man with nothing to chase once it's won." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of pine and snow. Far to the east, the mountains loomed faintly against the horizon, their peaks veiled in storm clouds. Edric followed the sight with his eyes and felt the pull of fate like a rope about his heart. He lay awake long after Torrhen slept, staring at the faint glow of the hilt. Somewhere out there, Miria lived still, gathering strength. Somewhere beyond those mountains waited the final piece of the sword, and the choice that would decide whether freedom was salvation or ruin. The night grew quiet, save for the whisper of the river, and in that stillness, a voice rose faintly from the wind, soft, distant, familiar. "The roots remember you, child of the Wolfswood. Come to us. The sword waits beneath the mountain." Leaf's voice. Edric closed his eyes and let the sound carry him. The road ahead would be long and dark, but the light within the hilt burned steady, and with it, hope. When dawn came, he rose without a word. Torrin followed, silent as ever. Together, they turned their faces toward the mountains, and the next chapter of the song that had already begun to write itself in blood and fire. The mountains rose before them like the bones of the world, vast and jagged, their peaks lost in cloud. The rivers they had followed for so long narrowed to swift, icy streams that tumbled down through stone ravines. The air grew thin and cold, and the ground beneath their boots was hard with frost. They traveled in silence for many days, the path winding higher and steeper with each turn. Torrin's beard gathered snow, and Edric's cloak stiffened with ice. At night they built small fires sheltered by rock and spoke little, for the wind carried strange voices, whispers that seemed to come from the stones themselves. By the 5th day, they reached a pass where the air shimmered faintly, like heat rising from a forge. The rocks were etched with spirals and runes older than men, and from somewhere deep below came the faint sound of rushing water. Torrin stopped to catch his breath. "If the sword's last piece lies here," he said, "it's guarded well. I've fought men, beasts, and worse, but never mountains." Edric nodded, his eyes scanning the valley below. The voice said the sword waits beneath the mountain. We must go down, not up. He found what he sought before nightfall, a fissure in the cliff face, narrow and half hidden behind a curtain of frozen ivy. From within came a faint warmth and the smell of damp earth. They slipped inside, torches burning low, the sound of their boots echoing in the dark. The passage sloped sharply downward. The air grew warmer, heavy with the scent of iron and root. After a while, the tunnel opened into a vast cavern. The walls glowed faintly, veins of red crystal running through the rock like blood beneath skin. In the center stood a great weirwood, its trunk twisted and gnarled, its leaves pale and motionless. Its roots sank deep into the stone, glowing faintly with the same red light. Leaf stood beside it. "You have come far, Edric of the Wolfswood," she said softly, "and the sword grows nearer to its birth." Torrin stepped forward wary. "So it's true then. This is where you keep your secrets." Leaf looked at him, unblinking. "There are no secrets here, only truths men have forgotten." Edric's hand went to the hilt at his belt. The voice said the sword waits beneath the mountain. Is this where it ends? Leaf's golden eyes flickered toward the tree. Yes, and no. The blade sleeps beneath the roots, bound by blood to the heart of the world. But the sword will not awaken for steel or fire. It will awaken for choice. Torrin frowned. Choice? The sword of freedom cannot be wielded by one who seeks it for himself, Leaf said. To break chains, you must first understand what it means to wear them. Edric's heart tightened. I have worn them. Not the ones that bind your flesh, Leaf said gently. The ones that bind your soul. Before he could reply, the ground trembled. From the shadows beyond the weirwood came a sound like the crack of thunder. A gust of wind snuffed out their torches. When the light returned, Miria Rivers stood before them. She was changed, her skin pale as marble, her eyes dark pools rimmed with fire. She carried a staff crowned with a crystal like the one Edric had found in the barrow. I followed your trail, boy, she said. The sword's call is loud to those who can hear it. Leaf's face hardened. You have no right to stand here. I have every right, Miria said. It was my blood that bound the first Greenseer. My kin were sacrificed to the roots while your kind watched. I will not let them sleep forever." Her gaze fell on Edric. "Give me the hilt. With it, I can finish the sword. I can free them all." "And bind the rest of us," Edric said. "You'd trade one prison for another." "You speak of chains," she hissed. "But you have never known eternity. Roots twisting through your veins, your mind trapped in bark and sap, your heart beating once in 100 years. I will end their suffering." She raised her staff. The crystal blazed red, and the ground split open. From the chasm rose figures made of root and bone, green seers long dead, their eyes hollow, their hands like claws. They moved toward the weirwood, silent and terrible. Torrhen drew his sword, shouting, "Back, witch!" Leaf stepped forward, her small frame aglow with golden light. "Edric!" she cried. "The choice is upon you." The hilt in Edric's hand pulsed with heat, and he felt the weight of all their voices, Leaf's sorrow, Miria's rage, Torrhen's loyalty, the whispering roots of the mountain itself. The weirwood loomed before him, its face carved with the faint outline of a man, or perhaps a god. He understood then. The sword's final piece was not a blade of steel, but a bond of will, the choice between freedom and dominion, between life and sacrifice. Miria's voice rose to a scream. "Take it! Wield it! End the curse!" Leaf's voice cut through hers, calm and clear. "Or lay it down and let the world choose its own path." The light from the staff clashed with the glow of the weirwood, red and gold twisting together. Torrhen shouted something lost in the roar, and Edric raised the hilt high. "I will not be your weapon," he said. He drove the hilt into the ground. The cavern erupted with light, roots lashed like whips, and the green seers cried out as they crumbled into dust. Miria fell to her knees, screaming, her staff shattering. Leaf flung up her arms, her golden eyes blazing. The light grew brighter and brighter until the world vanished. When Edric opened his eyes, he lay upon the mountain slope beneath a gray dawn. The air was still, and Torrhen knelt beside him, bruised but alive. The hilt was gone. In its place lay a single root, pale and smooth, curling gently in the snow. Leaf was nowhere to be seen. Miria's body lay a few paces away, her eyes closed, her face peaceful at last. In her hand, she still clutched the broken shard of her staff. Edric took it gently and placed it beside her. "What happened?" Torrhen whispered. Edric looked toward the horizon, where the first light touched the peaks. "I made a choice," he said. "The sword will never be forged again." Torrhen nodded slowly. "Then it's done?" Edric shook his head. "No. The sword's spirit lives on, not in steel, but in us. So long as men fight for freedom, its edge remains." They buried Miria beneath the mountain and turned west, where spring was stirring in the valleys. The snow began to melt beneath their feet, revealing shoots of green. As they descended, Edric thought he heard a whisper in the wind. Not words, but a feeling, soft and warm as sunlight through leaves. The forest remembers. He smiled faintly, and though he carried no sword, he felt its strength within him still, the unbreakable will of all who dream of freedom, burning quietly, like a flame that would never die. The snows melted quickly that spring, and the rivers roared with life. Edric and Torrhen descended the high passes, following the silver ribbons of meltwater that carved their way down through stone and pine. The world seemed to wake around them. Buds broke upon the branches, and deer moved through the meadows again, light and sure-footed. Yet for all the beauty that surrounded them, Edric's heart was heavy. He carried no sword, no banner, no token of victory, only the memory of what he had done beneath the mountain. The sword of freedom was gone, unmade by his own hand, yet its echo still stirred in him, quiet as breath. Some nights, when he closed his eyes, he saw the weirwood's pale face and heard Leaf's voice, soft as falling snow. Freedom is not given, it is remembered. Torrhen said little. The man had grown grimmer, though his eyes held a kind of peace Edric had not seen before. They traveled together as brothers in silence, sharing bread and fire, the bond between them stronger than words. At the edge of the mountains, they came upon a small village, little more than huts of timber and thatch nestled beside a clear lake. Smoke rose from the chimneys, and laughter drifted through the cold air. Edric felt a strange ache in his chest. He had not heard laughter since before the war, before Harlan's chains. The villagers watched them warily as they approached. A woman stirring a pot outside her door raised her head. "Travelers?" she asked. "Aye," Torrhen said. "We come down from the high pass. We seek food and word of the lands below." The woman studied them, then nodded. "You'll find welcome by the fire, if you bring no trouble." They entered the longhouse at the village's heart. It was warm inside, the air thick with the scent of smoke and stew. Children peered from behind benches, wide-eyed at the sight of strangers. An old man with a gray beard sat by the hearth, carving runes into a strip of wood. He looked up as they entered. "Not many come this way from the mountains," he said. "What brings you?" "Freedom," Edric answered before Torrhen could speak. The old man smiled faintly. "A fine word, that one, though it buys little bread." Edric sat beside the fire. "Freedom's not something to buy, it's something to keep." The carver tilted his head. "You speak like a man who's seen much and lost more. Tell me then, what did it cost you?" Edric stared into the flames for a long moment before replying. "Everything that could be taken, and still it was worth it." The old man nodded as if he understood. "Then you've learned the truth of it. Stay the night. The snows will close the pass again soon enough." So they stayed. That night, after the others had gone to their beds, Edric walked alone to the lake. The moon hung low, casting a trail of silver across the dark water. He knelt by the shore, cupping the cold surface in his hands. For a moment, the reflection changed. The water rippled, and in it he saw Leaf's face, pale and kind. "You did well, child of the Wolf's Wood," her voice whispered through the still air. "The roots remember." Edric bowed his head. "Then the sword's truly gone?" "The sword was never more than a mirror," Leaf said. "It showed you what lay within. You freed yourself, and through you, the forest breathes again." "I feel no victory," he murmured. "Only emptiness." "That too will pass," she said softly. "Freedom is not peace. It is the space where peace may one day grow." The image faded with the ripples, and he was alone again. When dawn came, Torrhen found him sitting by the water's edge. "You spoke to her again?" the older man said. It wasn't a question. Edric nodded. "And what did she tell you?" "That the sword was never real." Torrhen grunted. "Sounds about right. All legends lie, one way or another. The best ones tell us something true while pretending not to." He looked out over the lake. "What will you do now?" "I'll go home," Edric said. "The Wolf's Wood still stands, and my people are waiting." "Home," Torrhen repeated quietly. "I've not had one of those in a long time." "Come with me," Edric said. "There's land enough, and men enough, who will follow a sword arm like yours." Torrhen smiled faintly. "I might at that. Someone's got to keep you out of trouble." They left the village at midday. The people waved them off with smiles, and one of the children pressed a sprig of pine into Edric's hand, for luck. He tucked it into his cloak and smiled back. For many days they journeyed west, across meadows newly green and rivers swollen with snowmelt. The further they went, the more signs of peace they found. Farms rebuilt, fields plowed, banners raised not in conquest, but in memory. But news traveled faster than wind. By the time they reached the borders of the Wolfswood, word had already spread of a storm that had torn through the rills, of King Harlan's hall split open by roots, and his men scattered. Some said he had gone mad, wandering the coast in rags, muttering of trees that spoke in dreams. Edric said nothing, though his heart was heavy with pity. He had wished to destroy the tyrant, but the forest had chosen mercy instead, and perhaps that too was a kind of justice. At last they reached the valley where Edric had been born. The huts of his people stood there still, smoke rising from their hearths, though the palisade was new and strong. When he stepped through the gate, the watchman stared as if seeing a ghost. "Edric," he whispered. "By the gods, Edric of the Wolfswood." The cry went up, and soon the whole clan was gathered. Faces he remembered, faces he had feared lost forever. His father's old hammer hung above the gate, polished and proud. A woman stepped forward, the chieftain's daughter, who had once been his friend. Her eyes widened in disbelief. "You're alive." "I am," he said simply, "and so are we all." They feasted that night beneath the open sky. Fires blazed, and meat roasted over the flames. Children danced, and songs long unsung were lifted again to the stars. Edric sat among them, listening, a quiet smile upon his lips. Torrin raised a cup beside him. "To the wolf who would not bow." Edric laughed softly. "To the sword that broke itself," he said, and they drank. Later, when the fires burned low, he wandered to the edge of the woods. The moonlight shimmered on the leaves, and the wind whispered through the boughs like distant voices. He thought of Leaf, of Myria, of all he had seen and lost. He drew the pine sprig from his cloak and planted it in the soil beside the gate. "Grow," he said, "and remember." Somewhere in the darkness, a wolf howled, low, proud, and free. Edric lifted his head to the stars and felt the forest breathe with him. The wind rustled through the trees like the turning of a great page, as if the land itself were beginning a new story. And though no blade hung at his side, he knew that the true sword of freedom, the one born of will and heart, would live on in every hand that dared to rise against the darkness. Thus ended the tale of Edric of the Wolfswood, last bearer of the unmade sword. But the world would remember his name, and in quiet places, when the wind stirred the leaves, his story would be told again, not as legend, but as promise. For in every age, when tyrants rise and hope grows thin, someone, somewhere, will hear the forest whisper, "The roots remember." The seasons turned. Spring deepened into summer, and the Wolfswood grew thick with life once more. Deer returned to the glades where war had once burned, and the streams ran clear over their beds of smooth gray stone. The people of the wood rebuilt what had been lost: huts, fences, and hope alike. And though peace never lasted long in the north, it was peace all the same, and that was enough. Edric of the Wolfswood no longer lived as a hunted man, nor as a boy dreaming of freedom. He lived as one who had won it, and who now bore its weight. His people looked to him for counsel, for strength, for remembrance, and though he smiled and spoke gently, he often found his thoughts straying toward the mountains, toward the weirwood roots that wound beneath the world. Sometimes, in the still of night, he dreamed of the sword of freedom, not as it had been, glowing, terrible, alive, but as a whisper in his hands, a pulse of light just beyond reach. He would wake before dawn, breath cold, heart restless, and walk beneath the trees until the sun touched the highest boughs. On one such morning, a rider came from the east, his horse mud-splashed and weary. He wore the gray of the hill clans, and his eyes were full of dust and fear. "Lord Edric," the man said, bowing low, "forgive the haste. Word comes from the coast. A storm like no other has torn the sea in two. The rills burn, and the dead do not stay buried." The hall fell silent. Edric rose slowly. "The dead?" "Aye," said the rider. "Men speak of figures walking the shore, pale as driftwood, eyes black as pitch. They carry no weapons, yet the wind bends to them. Some call it witchcraft. Others say the sea has come to claim what men took from it." Torhen, standing at Edric's side, grunted. "Sounds like sailors' ghosts and frightened tongues." But Edric's brow furrowed. "No," he said softly. "It's the forest again. Something stirs." That night, sleep would not come to him. He sat by the hearth while the fire died to embers, watching the shadows twist along the floor. When the last spark faded, a whisper brushed his ear, faint, familiar, full of sorrow. "Edric." The roots remember. He rose at once. The room was empty, yet outside, through the narrow window, the wind was moving through the trees, though no storm blew. Leaf's voice came again, barely a breath. "A wrong unmade is not a wrong undone. What you broke stirs once more." He understood then. By unmaking the sword, he had freed its spirit, but not destroyed it. The will that had bound it still lingered, searching for shape. And if the dead walked, perhaps they walked in answer to that call. By dawn, he had gathered his gear. Torren tried to protest, but Edric only smiled. "You told me once that freedom leaves a man with nothing to chase. I think I've found something worth chasing again." They rode together toward the east, across hills golden with heather and valleys green with summer. Villages lay quiet in the morning mist, and shepherds watched from the slopes as the two men passed like ghosts. By the third day, they reached the edge of the moors, where the ground turned black and soft. The wind carried the salt of the sea, and gulls wheeled above the cliffs. Smoke rose on the horizon, faint, white, and thin. They reached the rills by nightfall. Where once King Harlan's hall had stood, only ruin remained. The stones were blackened, the walls half swallowed by creeping roots. The sea had clawed inland, flooding the lowlands with brine and driftwood. In the moonlight, figures moved among the ruins. At first, Edric thought them men, but as they drew closer, he saw the truth. Their skin was pale as ash, their eyes empty hollows filled with black water. They walked not as the living do, but as sleepwalkers, slow, deliberate, guided by some unseen will. Torren drew his sword. "Gods help us," he whispered. "The drowned made flesh." "No," said Edric. "The sword's memory." He stepped forward. The air grew heavy. From within the ruins, a voice rose, soft, lilting, and full of ancient grief. "Edric of the Wolf's Wood," it said, "breaker of chains, unmaker of blades." A shape emerged from the shadows, tall, cloaked in seaweed and rags. The moonlight caught her face, and his breath caught in his throat. Miria. But she was changed. Death had not claimed her gently. Her eyes were dark pools, her hair streaked with white, her voice a whisper of waves upon stone. "You broke the sword," she said, each word trembling with power, "but not its promise. Its spirit lives, and it calls to me." "Miria," Edric said softly, "you died beneath the mountain." "I died," she said, But death would not have me. The sea took me instead, and in its depths I heard the song of the sword. It spoke of freedom, of power unclaimed. I will finish what I began." She lifted her hands, and the dead stirred. The earth itself seemed to groan as they moved toward him. Torrhen raised his blade, but Edric caught his arm. "No steel," he said. "They are bound to her, not by flesh but by will." He stepped forward alone. The dead halted. Miria's gaze burned into him. "Why fight it, Edric?" she asked. "The world will never be free. Men will always make chains of iron, of fear, of faith. But with the sword reborn, we can break the circle. We can end it." "The sword is gone," he said. "There's nothing left to forge." Her lips curved into a sad smile. "There is always something left. You carry its heart." She raised her hand, and the air shimmered. The lake behind the ruins began to churn, its waters rising into a spiral of foam and light. Within the whirlpool, a shape formed, not a blade of steel, but a blade of light, long and bright and alive. The air thrummed with its presence. "The sword of freedom reborn," Miria whispered. "But it will answer only to its true keeper. Join me, Edric. Together, we can set the world free." He felt the pull, fierce, seductive, endless. It was as if the sword itself reached for him, remembering his touch. But then he saw the dead kneeling in the shallows, their faces twisted in despair, and he knew what kind of freedom she offered. "To free all things," he said quietly. "You would destroy them." Miria's eyes blazed. "Better destruction than servitude." He shook his head. "No, freedom is not release from life. It is life itself." He spread his arms, and the wind howled through the ruins. The forest far to the west seemed to stir in answer. Roots burst from the ground, coiling around his feet, their glow faint but steady. "The forest remembers," he said, voice rising, "and it remembers mercy." Light exploded from the roots, racing across the earth. The dead shuddered and fell still. Miria screamed as the glow reached her, her form unraveling like mist in sunlight. When it was over, silence returned. The moon shone pale on the ruined hall, and the waves lapped quietly at the stones. Miria was gone, and the sword's light with her. Torrhen lowered his blade. "Is it done then?" Edric nodded. "For now, the sword sleeps again, in the roots, in the sea, in all that lives and breathes." They stood there until dawn, watching the first light touch the waves. The sea was calm once more, and the dead did not rise again. When they turned westward, the wind carried with it a whisper, faint, fleeting, and familiar. "The roots remember." Edric smiled. "Aye," he murmured, "and so will we." Together, he and Torrhen walked toward the waking sun, their shadows long upon the grass. The age of heroes was ending, but the song of freedom, quiet, defiant, eternal, had only just begun. Summer waned, and the first gold leaves began to fall upon the wolfswood. Seasons passed quietly after the storm of the rills, and the north seemed to breathe again. The rivers calmed, the seas grew still, and no further word came of walking corpses or the witch who had called them. For a time, it seemed that peace, that strange and fragile creature, had chosen to dwell among them once more. Edric lived among his people, helping rebuild what ruin and war had left behind. He hunted with the clansmen, shared ale in the longhouse, and taught the young to wield a blade, though he kept no sword for himself. The old songs were sung again, songs of the Dawn Age, when heroes were made not by crown or coin, but by courage alone. Yet even in peace, the past lingered. On cold nights, when the moon hung white over the trees, Edric would feel the earth stirring beneath his feet, the faint, slow heartbeat of the roots deep below. He had come to know it as a comfort, the quiet reminder that the forest still watched and remembered. Torrin had taken to living nearby, building a small hall by the river's bend. He had found a wife among the fisherfolk and grew content in the life of a free man. Sometimes he and Edric would sit together on the banks, speaking little, sharing the kind of silence that only men who have faced death together can truly share. It was in the 3rd year after the storm that a raven came from the south, bearing a message sealed in wax the color of midnight. No sigil marked it, yet Edric knew before he broke the seal that it would change the quiet of his life. The letter was written in a hand, fine as spider silk. To Edric of the Wolfswood, breaker of chains, the roots remember, but not all remember kindly. The sword you unmade still whispers beneath the earth. The children no longer walk alone, and in the ruins of the Barrow of Kings, something stirs that was never meant to wake. Come, if you would see the truth of what you began. L. Leaf. Edric folded the parchment and looked toward the forest, its canopy glimmering gold in the dying light. He knew what it meant. His peace was at an end. That night, he went to Torrin's hall. "I've had word from her," he said. "From Leaf?" Torrin's face darkened. "The forest witch? I thought she was gone with the rest of them." "She's not gone," Edric said. "And neither is what we buried. The Barrow of Kings stirs again." The older man sighed. "You mean to go?" "I must." Torrin's jaw worked. At last he nodded. "Then I'll come." They rode at dawn, through the mists of late summer and the quiet hum of cicadas. The journey was long but familiar, and as they drew nearer to the old moors, Edric felt the air grow heavy, not with rain, but with memory. The Barrow of Kings was as they had left it, yet not. The great mound had split open, its crown of grass torn away to reveal the stone beneath. From within the darkness came a faint red glow, like a dying coal refusing to fade. Leaf stood at the entrance. Her golden eyes met Edric's as if she had been waiting since the day they parted. "The sword sleeps," she said, "but dreams can be dangerous." Torrin glanced uneasily at the dark hole. "What lies in there?" "Something old," Leaf answered. "Something that remembers the shape of power." Edric stepped closer. "I thought the sword was gone." "It is," she said, "but its spirit endures. When you broke it, you scattered its will, part to the sea, part to the forest, and part to the bones of the earth. Now, the last fragment seeks form again." "How?" "Through memory," Leaf said. "Through men's desire. The more they speak of it, the stronger its shadow grows, and men have begun to whisper once more of a blade that can free all chains." Edric's hands curled into fists. "Then we must stop it." Leaf's expression was unreadable. "You cannot stop a dream. You can only change the one who dreams it." The air around them seemed to thrum. The red glow deepened, and a low sound, not quite a voice but close, echoed from the barrow. Edric. It was his name, spoken not aloud, but within his mind, clear as thought. Torrin heard it too. His face had gone pale. "Gods, it knows you." Leaf's eyes gleamed. "It remembers its maker." Edric swallowed hard and stepped forward. "If this is what remains of the sword, then it calls for me, and I will answer." He entered the barrow. The passage sloped downward, walls slick with moisture, the air thick and close. The red glow pulsed faintly from ahead, and with every step it grew brighter. He reached the burial chamber, where once he had faced the spirit of the old king. Now the floor had cracked open, and from within the fissure rose a shape of light, not solid, but neither air nor fire. It hovered before him, changing form like smoke in wind. Now a blade, now a flame, now a chain. Freedom, it whispered. You named me thus, but freedom is never still. Every chain broken leaves another to be forged. Let me live again, and I will break them all. Edric's heart pounded. He felt its pull, strong as tide. The promise of it was intoxicating. A world without lords or slaves, without kings or crowns. But he remembered Leif's words. You cannot stop a dream. You can only change the one who dreams it. He knelt beside the fissure and placed his hand upon the stone. Then dream of mercy, he said softly. Dream of those who choose, not those who command. Sleep, and remember what freedom means. The light trembled. A long moment passed, then another. Slowly, the glow dimmed, sinking back into the crack. The air grew still once more. When he rose, Leif was standing behind him. You have learned, she said, and the forest is grateful. He turned to her. Will it sleep forever? Nothing sleeps forever, she said. Not even freedom. But you have taught it patience. That may be enough. Torrin appeared in the doorway, relief plain in his face. Is it done? For now, Edric said. They left the barrow as dawn broke over the moors. The first light touched the stones, and for a heartbeat, Edric thought he saw faces in the mist. Old kings, proud and solemn, bowing their heads as if in thanks. Leif watched him with quiet eyes. The age of heroes wanes, Edric of the Wolfswood. Soon men will forget the old songs, but the roots will remember, and when the world needs them again, the forest will whisper your name. He smiled faintly. Then let it whisper quietly. I've had enough of glory. Leif's lips curved into a rare smile. As you wish. She turned, fading into the morning light, until only the rustle of leaves marked her passing. Edric stood long upon the hill, watching the sun rise over the land he had once fought to free. Torrin came to stand beside him, resting a hand on his shoulder. What now? The older man asked. Now, Edric said. We live and we remember. And so they did. The years that followed were kind. The clans of the Wolfswood prospered. The rivers ran clear, and no tyrant's banners flew upon the wind. Yet sometimes, when the fire burned low and night pressed close, Edric would hear the faintest murmur from the earth. Not warning, not command, but a promise. The roots remember. And he would smile, knowing that though the age of heroes had passed, the song of freedom would never end. Years rolled by like the slow turning of a great wheel. The age of heroes drifted toward twilight, though no man alive could say when one age ended and another began. Tales of Edric of the Wolfswood passed from lips to hearth, from fathers to sons, changing shape with every telling. Some spoke of him as a spirit of the trees, others as a mortal man who defied kings and gods alike. But among the clan folk of the north, he remained a simple truth, the one who broke his chains and chose mercy over might. Edric himself grew older. The black of his hair silvered and lines deepened around his eyes, though the fire within them never dimmed. He still walked the woods each dawn, following the same trails he had once fled down as a boy. The air there was clean and cold, and the whisper of the leaves above was music to him. Sometimes he would pause by the old weirwood glade, where a single pale tree still grew, its roots twisting deep into the earth. He would rest his hand upon its trunk and for a heartbeat feel the pulse of life beneath the bark. The roots remembered, just as Leif had promised. But peace, even in the north, is a thing men rarely keep. It began with fire, the smoke of burning farms drifting through the western woods. Word came of iron-born raiders striking along the coast, not content with plunder, but claiming the land as their own. The petty kings of the rills were dead, and in the emptiness they left, chaos spread like rot. Edric had hoped the madness of lords had died with Harlan, but men always find new ways to forge old chains. Torrin came to him one evening, his beard gone white, but his voice still steady. "You've heard the talk," he said. "The raiders move inland. They've taken the river crossings. They mean to push through the Wolf's Wood before the snows fall." Edric nodded. "Then the forest will rise again." The old captain smiled grimly. "I thought you'd say that." By the next moon, every clan from the Shivering Sea to the Barrowlands had sent men. They gathered beneath the ancient oaks, warriors with axes, bows, and hearts forged in hardship. No banners flew, only the green of the trees and the gray of wolfskin. Edric stood before them, not as a lord, but as one of their own. "The Ironborn come for chains," he said, his voice carrying through the wood. "Let us give them roots instead." The battle was not long, nor glorious, but it was fierce. The raiders came up the river in longships, their oars cutting the water like claws. The forest seemed still as they entered, until the arrows began to fall. From the trees came death, swift and silent. The woods themselves seemed alive, branches snapping and roots twisting beneath the feet of the invaders. Torrin fought at Edric's side, the two men moving as one. When the last of the longships burned, the river ran red with the blood of men who had thought the North weak. The survivors fled toward the sea, but the forest closed behind them. When dawn broke, the Wolfswood stood untouched. Edric looked upon the fallen and felt no triumph, only sorrow. He had sworn once that freedom would not come by blood, yet here it was again, bought and paid for in the old way. That night, he sat alone beside the great weirwood, the moonlight silvering its pale bark. "You see," he murmured, "we have learned nothing." The wind shifted, carrying a faint rustle through the leaves. Then, as softly as a breath, a voice answered. "Freedom is not a lesson, child of the Wolfswood. It is a choice men must make again and again." He closed his eyes. "Leaf." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, tender as falling snow. "I am in the roots and the water, in the breath of all that lives. You gave men the right to choose, Edric. Whether they choose well is no longer yours to bear." He bowed his head. "Then why does it still hurt? Because you remember, and remembrance is the truest form of love." The voice faded, but the words lingered. When morning came, Torrin found him still sitting there, his cloak wet with dew. "You'll catch your death sleeping under trees," the old captain grumbled. Edric smiled faintly. "If I do, the forest will know where to find me." Seasons passed again. Torrin grew frail, and when at last he died, Edric buried him beneath the willow by the river where they had first spoken of freedom. The clans came to mourn, and songs were sung that would echo long after their own lives faded. After that, Edric walked the woods alone. The years had slowed him, but his step remained sure. When the snows came, he built his fire deep in the glade beneath the weirwood's boughs. There he sat, watching the flames dance, remembering all that had been, Leaf's golden eyes, Miria's sorrow, his father's forge, the mountain's light. The forest whispered around him. He could almost hear their voices again, faint but clear. Freedom is not a gift. It is a burden carried through generations. As the fire burned low, he took from his pouch a small thing he had carried all those years. A smooth crystal shard, dull and cracked, the last remnant of the sword that had once promised to change the world. He held it to the firelight, and for a moment it gleamed faintly, as though alive. He smiled. "Rest now," he said softly. "The world no longer needs you." The wind sighed through the branches, and the flame flickered out. When morning came, the clansmen found the glade empty. The snow was undisturbed, save for a single trail of footprints leading into the trees. And then, nothing. No sign of struggle, no body, no blood. Only the weirwood stood silent, its roots winding deep, its red leaves rustling softly, though there was no breeze. In time, they built a cairn of stone there, and the people came to call it the Hill of the Free. Travelers swore that in the quiet of dawn, when mist clung to the branches, they could see a figure standing beside the weirwood, a tall man in a wolfskin cloak, his hand resting upon the tree's pale trunk. Some said he was Edric himself, watching still. Others said he was only a memory, the dream of freedom given shape by the forest. But the old women of the Wolfswood would tell it differently. They would lean close to their fires, voices low and sure, and say, "The forest remembers. The sword of freedom was never lost, for it was never steel. It was a man, and his heart beat so fiercely that the roots themselves learned to echo it." And on cold nights, when the wind moved through the trees, the children of the Wolfswood would hear it. The sound of that echo, deep and endless, like the slow breath of the earth, a reminder and a promise. The roots remember. Autumn bled into winter, and winter into years. The Wolfswood endured, as all things born of the north endure, through wind and storm, and the endless passage of time. The cairn that marked Edric's last resting place became a place of quiet pilgrimage. Men came to it not for prayer or prophecy, but to remember. Children of the clans would lay pine branches at its base and whisper the words passed down to them. The roots remember. And though none could say where Edric had gone, some swore that when the snow fell thickest, the forest grew warmer, as if the land itself breathed with life unseen. The age of heroes waned. New kings rose from the south, crowning themselves beneath towers of stone. The old ways began to fade, and with them the stories that had bound men to the earth and sky. But in the north, tales die slowly, and the memory of Edric of the Wolfswood lingered like the glow of embers in the hearth. Generations passed. In the 3rd century after Edric's disappearance, when the north had become a realm of keeps and bannermen, there was born in the Wolfswood a girl named Lyanna of the Pines. She was the daughter of a forester, small and quick, her eyes gray as morning frost. From the time she could walk, she loved the forest, with a hunger her kin did not understand. While others stayed close to the hearth in winter, Lyanna roamed among the trees, whispering to them as if they might answer. Her mother would shake her head and mutter that the girl had the forest's own madness, but her grandmother only smiled, for she remembered the old tales. On Lyanna's 12th name day, her grandmother took her hand and led her to the cairn on the hill. Snow fell lightly that day, and the woods stood silent. "Do you know what this place is?" the old woman asked. Lyanna nodded. "The Hill of the Free, where Edric vanished." "Aye," said her grandmother. "Some say he was taken by the old gods, others that he became part of the roots themselves. My mother swore that he walks still when danger comes to the woods. Do you believe that?" Lyanna looked up at the trees. The snow was falling thicker now, clinging to the branches. "I believe the forest listens," she said. The old woman smiled. "Then perhaps it listens to you." She placed a small stone in the girl's palm, smooth, cold, and pale as milk. "Keep this," she said. "It's been passed down in our bloodline since the day of Edric. The elders say it was part of something greater once, something that shone." Lyanna turned the stone in her hand, and for an instant it glimmered faintly in the weak light. She thought she heard something, a soft hum like wind through leaves, but when she blinked, it was gone. That night she dreamt of roots winding through dark soil, of a light buried deep beneath them, pulsing like a heartbeat. She saw a man's shadow kneeling before a weirwood and heard a whisper that filled her with both fear and comfort. The sword sleeps, child of the forest's kin. One day it shall wake, not in steel, but in you. When she woke, her heart was racing. The stone beside her bed was warm to the touch. Years passed, and Lyanna grew into womanhood. The North was changing again. Lords feuded, kings in Winterfell sought to bind the wild woods beneath their rule, and men came to the Wolfswood with axes and fire. They cut deep into the heart of the forest, felling trees that had stood since the dawn. The forest whispered, restless. One night, as smoke rose from the southern edge of the woods, Lyanna felt a strange pull, the same she had known as a child, only stronger. The pale stone burned hot in her pocket. She followed its call through the snow until she came to the old glade where the weirwood stood. The tree was the same as in the stories, pale bark, red leaves like frozen blood. But now its roots were cracked and blackened where fire had touched them. Lyanna fell to her knees, pressing her hands to the cold earth. "Forgive them," she whispered. "They do not understand." The ground trembled faintly beneath her palms. Then a voice, soft as wind yet heavy with memory, spoke from the stillness. "You hear us?" Lyanna gasped. Who are you?" "We are the roots. We are the memory. We are what was once bound and what was freed. You carry a piece of us." She drew the stone from her cloak. It glowed now, faint but steady, a heart of light beneath her fingers. "The sword is not gone," the voice said. "It was never meant to be forgotten, only to sleep. Through you, it wakes again." Lyanna's breath caught. "I'm no warrior. I can't." "The sword of freedom is not for warriors," the voice murmured. "It is for those who remember when others forget." The light flared, and the ground opened. From the earth rose tendrils of root and vine, curling around her wrists and forearms, not in pain, but in embrace. The glow from the stone spread through them, threading her veins with warmth. When it faded, she was alone again, but changed. The stone had vanished, leaving a mark upon her palm, pale and shaped like the rune of a flame. That night, when the woodcutters came again with their torches, the wind turned wild. The trees groaned and bent, and the snow fell thick as ash. The men fled, swearing that the forest itself had come alive, that a woman stood among the burning trunks, her eyes bright as silver, her hands wreathed in light. By dawn, the fires were out, and not a single tree had fallen. Lyanna returned to her home quietly, saying nothing, but her people began to whisper her name in the same breath as Edric's, the girl of the woods who could command the roots, who healed the trees with her touch. They said the blood of the old hero flowed in her veins, that she was the forest's chosen. And sometimes, when she stood alone beneath the stars, Lyanna would feel the hum of that buried power, the heartbeat beneath the world. It frightened her, and comforted her too. She knew then what Leif had told Edric long ago, that freedom was not a single act, but a seed passed from hand to hand, generation to generation. The forest would endure. The roots would remember. And now, through her, the song of the Sword of Freedom began again, not in war, but in the quiet defiance of life refusing to die. Far below, deep in the earth where no light reached, the roots stirred, sensing her touch. The heartbeat quickened, and in that endless dark, something smiled. not of malice, but of memory. The roots remember. Winter came heavy to the Wolfswood that year, a true northern winter that swallowed sound and color alike. Snow lay deep as a man's height, and the trees bent beneath its weight like old men burdened with secrets. The world seemed hushed, waiting. Lyanna of the Pines moved through that quiet as though she belonged to it. The years had hardened her, but her eyes still held the brightness of the girl who had once knelt at the weirwood's roots and heard the earth whisper back. She had grown into a woman of quiet strength, neither lord nor lady, yet the clans obeyed her voice when she spoke. Some called her the daughter of the roots now. Others whispered another name. The sword awakened. She never spoke of that. It had been 5 winters since the burning of the southern woods, 5 since the mark had come upon her palm. In that time, the forest had grown thicker, its borders creeping outward as if reclaiming what the axes had taken. Animals returned to the glades. Streams that had long dried to trickles now ran swift and clear. Yet with that renewal came unease. Men said they dreamed strange dreams, of trees that walked, of faces watching from the snow, of whispers that spoke not to their ears but to their hearts. The old tales had come alive again, and the lords beyond the woods began to mutter of witchcraft. It was deep in that winter that the first messenger came, wrapped in furs and fear. He found Lyanna outside her father's hall, splitting wood. "My lady," he said, bowing low. "A summons from Lord Cregan of Winterfell. He bids you come at once. The king in the south sends envoys to the north, and there is talk of binding the woods under crown law. He seeks your counsel and your fealty." Lyanna set down the axe and wiped her brow. "Fealty," she repeated. The word tasted like ash. "Tell your lord I will come." The journey to Winterfell took 3 days. She rode alone, her cloak heavy with frost, the snow crunching beneath her horse's hooves. When at last the great walls of the castle rose from the white plain, she felt a weight settle in her chest. Not fear, but foreboding. Lord Cregan Stark received her in the great hall, where the banners of the direwolf hung heavy above the hearth. He was a stern man, gray of beard and clear of eye, his manner as cold and steady as the stones around him. "Lyanna of the Pines," he said, "you've kept your woods well. Few can claim such loyalty from both men and trees." "I serve neither," she replied evenly. "Only what remembers." His mouth twitched, the ghost of a smile. "Then you serve the north, whether you mean to or not." He gestured to a table spread with maps. "The south grows restless. The new king would tame the north as his forebears never could. His envoys ride even now, bringing gold and titles for those who bend the knee, and swords for those who will not." Lyanna studied the parchment, where the drawn borders of the north crept ever closer to her home. "And what would you have me do, Lord Stark?" Cregan's eyes met hers. "You command hearts I cannot. If the Wolfswood rises against the crown, I will have no peace in my realm. I ask you to keep your people from bloodshed. I ask you to speak for them and to listen." He leaned closer. "There are old powers at work in your woods. I feel them, though I do not name them. Do not let them turn against the living." Lyanna inclined her head. "I will do what I can." That night, she dreamed again. The hall around her faded, and she stood once more in the heart of the forest, before the weirwood whose roots drank from the world's bones. The air was alive with whispers, the old tongues murmuring in rhythm like wind through reeds. "Lyanna." The chains return. She turned slowly. The ground trembled beneath her feet, and from the mist rose shapes. Men in fine armor, their cloaks bright with southern colors. Behind them came fire devouring the trees. "They come not with blades alone," said the whisper. "They come with promises, with words that bind more tightly than iron." "What must I do?" Lyanna asked. The voice grew fainter, like breath slipping away. "Remember." She woke with the dawn. By midday, the southern envoys had arrived. 3 men in silk and fur, their sigils strange to northern eyes. Their leader, Sir Marion Flowers, was tall and smooth-faced, with a tongue made for honeyed lies. "My lady of the forest," he said, bowing too deeply. "You stand in the favor of your people. The crown would honor that. Swear your loyalty, and his grace will name you Warden of the Wolfswood. Gold, land, titles, all yours, if you but kneel." Lyanna regarded him steadily. "And if I do not?" He smiled, soft and sharp. "Then the crown will find others who will." The air in the hall seemed to grow colder. Lyanna's hand brushed the scar upon her palm, and she felt the faint stir of warmth beneath her skin. "I have seen what happens when men make chains," she said quietly, "and I will not forge new ones." Sir Marion's smile faltered. "You would defy the king?" "I would remember the world before there were kings." The envoy's composure cracked for an instant. "Then you will bring ruin upon your people." "Ruin," she murmured, "or freedom. It depends on who remembers." That night, the envoys left Winterfell under a pale moon. Cregan said nothing, but as Lyanna turned to depart, he spoke softly. "Be careful, child of the forest. The South has long arms, and it fears what it cannot understand." She rode back through the snow, her thoughts heavy. When she reached the forest's edge, she saw lights moving among the trees, torches where no torches should be. The axemen had returned. Lyanna dismounted and walked forward, her boots sinking deep into the drifts. The men turned at her approach, laughter dying in their throats. There were a dozen of them, hired blades from the lowlands, their hands red with sap and blood alike. "Back to your hearths," she said. "You've no place here." Their leader sneered. "You think you can frighten us, witch?" She raised her hand, palm outward. The rune upon it glowed faintly, a soft white light that cast no shadow. "I do not wish to frighten you." The ground trembled. Roots burst from the snow, coiling like serpents around the men's feet. They shouted, hacking with their axes, but the wood was stronger than iron. In moments they were bound fast, their torches snuffed by wind and earth alike. Lyanna lowered her hand, and the roots withdrew, leaving the men unharmed but trembling. "Go," she said. "Tell your lords the forest remembers. Tell them the North does not kneel." They fled into the dark, their cries fading into silence. When she turned back to the weirwood, the snow had stopped falling. The air was still. The forest seemed to breathe around her, alive with quiet approval. Lyanna knelt and pressed her marked hand to the roots. "I will remember," she whispered, "as he did before me." And somewhere deep below, in the heart of the earth, a light pulsed once more, faint, steady, eternal. The sword slept still, but its spirit stirred. The chain was unbroken, the will unforgotten, and the roots, as ever, remembered. The years that followed came to be called the Quiet War, though little about it was quiet. The South did not forgive defiance, and the crown's reach crept steadily northward, gold first, then swords. Men who once sang of the old heroes began to speak instead of loyalty, of order, of law. The lords of the coast swore their oaths to the king, hoping his banners would bring peace. But peace, when bought with chains, is never more than a lie. In the Wolfswood, Lyanna of the Pines became the voice of resistance. She sent no army, built no fort, raised no banner. Her power was older than that. It moved through whispers and roots, through the silent strength of the trees that guarded her people. She called no man to war, yet when soldiers marched toward the forest, they found their path swallowed by fog. Horses balked, men vanished, fires would not burn. The Southerners came to call her the Witch of the Northwind, though those who lived beneath her boughs named her otherwise: the forest's daughter, the keeper, the flame that does not burn. But power, even righteous power, draws enemies as flame draws moths. One winter's night, when the snows lay deep and the moon was a shard of silver, Lyanna was roused from sleep by a sound she had never heard before: metal striking wood, echoing through the stillness like thunder. She ran from her hall barefoot, the cold biting her skin. At the edge of the glade, torches burned. A company of southern knights stood before the weirwood, hacking at its roots with axes of black iron. The tree shuddered with each blow, its carved face weeping sap like blood. "Stop!" Lyanna's voice rang through the clearing. The men turned, startled by the figure who strode from the shadows, her cloak streaming like smoke. Their captain stepped forward. "By order of the king, this forest falls. The old gods are outlawed. Their time is done." Lyanna's gray eyes gleamed in the firelight. "And what god commands you to murder trees?" He sneered. "The only god that matters: power." The ground trembled beneath them. Then learn what power truly is. The snow rose in a whirl of wind, blinding the men. From the darkness between the trees came the groan of roots waking from sleep. Branches bent low, twisting, catching torches and snapping bones alike. The knights cried out as the forest came alive around them. Lyanna stood unmoving at the center of the storm, her hand raised, the pale mark upon her palm blazing like moonfire. When the wind stilled, the clearing lay empty. Only the broken axes remained, half swallowed by the roots that had closed again over the earth. The weirwood bled still but faintly. Its voice whispered through the leaves, soft and weary. "Daughter, the world forgets." Lyanna knelt, pressing her forehead to the cold bark. "Then I will remember for it." "You are the last leaf on an old branch," the voice murmured. "When you fall, who will take your place?" Her throat tightened. "There will be others. There must be. Then sow them well." The seasons turned again. The war burned slow but constant, a sickness that could not be cut away. The king's men built watchtowers near the forest's edge. Villages loyal to Lyanna vanished, swallowed by winter storms. For every victory she won through guile and spirit, another cost her dearly. And always, she felt the sword's dream stirring within her. It whispered at the edge of hearing. Never words, only feelings. Power, sacrifice, freedom. It called to her in her sleep, promising an end to the endless struggle. She resisted. But every year, the call grew stronger. Then came the night she found the child. It was deep in the forest, after a skirmish that had left the snow stained red. She followed the cries to a hollow beneath a fallen tree. There, wrapped in rags, lay an infant, her eyes the clear gray of storm clouds, her hair dark as soil. Lyanna gathered her into her arms. The child quieted instantly, her tiny fingers brushing against the mark on Lyanna's palm. A warmth spread through her chest, familiar, ancient. She looked up at the stars. "So the roots send another," she whispered. She named the girl Nerea. From that day forth, Lyanna raised her as her own, teaching her the ways of the forest, the language of leaves, the meaning of silence, the truth that freedom was not command, but choice. Neria grew swift and sure, her laughter bright against the gray winters. She could calm birds with a glance, call water from frozen streams, and walk barefoot through snow without leaving prints. But as she grew, so too did the shadow gathering beyond the trees. By Neria's 16th year, the king's army had reached the river crossings. They came not as raiders, but as conquerors, bearing the banners of a new faith. Word spread of a weapon they carried, a blade of black glass, forged by sorcery and meant to cut through any magic. The Chainbreaker's Bane, they named it, and with it, they vowed to fell the last stronghold of the old gods. Lyanna felt its coming long before the soldiers crossed into her lands. The air grew thin, the forest restless. When she touched the earth, she could feel the sword's echo beneath it, the slumbering spirit that had once been called freedom. It stirred uneasily, as if dreaming of its own death. That night, Lyanna climbed the hill where Edric's cairn stood, the moon bright above her. She knelt beside the stones and spoke into the cold wind. "You bore this burden once, old wolf. Now it falls to me." For a moment, she thought she heard a voice reply, low and distant, like the echo of a heartbeat through the roots. The chain returns. The choice remains. When dawn came, she gathered her cloak and her bow and kissed Neria's brow. "If I do not return," she said, "the forest is yours to guard." Neria caught her hand. "Mother, don't go. You said the old ways were meant to live, not to fight." "They are," Lyanna said softly. "But sometimes to live, we must fight for the right to live free." She left before the sun touched the trees. The battle that followed was not sung in any southern hall, for no minstrels came north to see it, but those who survived said the woods themselves rose that day. They spoke of a woman standing before the king's soldiers, her hair a dark banner, her eyes burning silver, the forest bending to her will. When the black blade fell, the ground split open. A wind rushed through the valley, cold and bright, and from the roots beneath the world came a sound like the beating of a heart. Then, silence. When the snow cleared, the army was gone. The forest stood untouched, and at its heart, where Lyanna had last been seen, a new tree grew, tall and strong, its bark pale as bone, its leaves the color of dawn. Beneath it, the mark of a hand pressed into the roots, faintly glowing. Neria found it days later. She fell to her knees, tears freezing on her cheeks. The tree's branches whispered above her, gentle, endless. "Remember," they said, "remember." And she did. Thus the flame passed again, from hero to keeper, from keeper to seed. The sword of freedom still slept beneath the earth, but its song lived on in the hearts of those who refused to kneel. The roots remembered, and now, through Neria, they would learn to dream anew. Spring came slowly to the north, reluctant and shy, but it came all the same. The rivers thawed, and the frost that had sheathed the wolfswood retreated into shadow. The snows melted from the high branches, revealing green shoots beneath, a promise renewed. Yet though the land stirred to life again, silence reigned where once Lyanna of the Pines had walked. Her name passed through the villages in whispers. Some said she had perished in flame, others that the forest had claimed her, drawing her down into its heart to sleep among the roots. But for those who still believed, the truth lived in the dawn mist that drifted through the trees. When the light fell just so, they swore they saw her shape, tall and still, her hand resting upon a pale barked trunk, her eyes like starlight caught in winter snow. Neria did not speak of what she knew. She lived quietly, tending to the forest as her mother had before her. Yet every morning she climbed the hill of Edric's cairn and laid her hand upon the new tree that had grown there, the one whose leaves gleamed red as flame. Beneath her touch, the bark felt warm. The roots pulsed faintly, as though a heart beat far below the soil. The forest had grown restless since the battle. It stretched its reach each season, vines and moss creeping into fields and ruins. Streams carved new paths, and deer gathered in greater numbers than before. The people of the Wolfswood said the land was healing. But Neria, who listened more closely, heard something deeper. The forest was remembering. At night she dreamed. She dreamed of roots stretching across the world, of a pulse like thunder moving through them, of voices whispering in the dark, hundreds, thousands, all calling the same word, freedom. In those dreams she saw faces she did not know, men and women from ages long gone, their hands raised toward the light. And among them, always, two figures stood apart, a man with a wolf's eyes and a woman crowned in leaves. When she woke, her pillow was wet with tears she did not understand. One morning, as the mist curled low among the trees, Neria found a stranger at the edge of her glade. He was a wanderer by his look, tall, lean, with hair the color of ash and eyes the hue of northern ice. His cloak was torn, his boots caked in mud, and at his hip hung a sword wrapped in cloth. "You've come far," she said, not unkindly. "Aye," he answered. His voice was rough as though unused. "I seek the hill of the free. They say a power sleeps there. I mean to see it." Neria studied him. "Many have sought it. Few return." He smiled faintly. "Then I'll make the few one more." She led him through the forest, her steps light, his heavy. The trees seemed to lean close as they passed, their branches whispering above. When they reached the hill, the stranger stopped. "This is it," he murmured. "I can feel it. Beneath the ground." Neria turned to him. "What is it you seek?" "An end," he said simply. "My people serve a new king, one who calls himself breaker of faith, slayer of gods. He fears what lies in this forest. He sent me to learn its secret, or destroy it." "And will you?" she asked. He hesitated. "I thought I would. But now?" His gaze lingered on the tree's pale bark, on the faint glow that pulsed beneath it. "Now I don't know what to believe." Neria walked to the tree and placed her palm upon its trunk. The mark upon her skin shimmered faintly. "What you feel is no weapon," she said. "It is memory. Life that will not forget itself." "Then it must be dangerous," he said. "All memory is dangerous," she replied, "because it reminds men of what they were before they knelt." He stepped closer. "And what were we?" "Free," she said simply. The wind stirred, carrying with it the scent of pine and thawing earth. For a long while, neither spoke. The stranger reached for the cloth-wrapped sword at his hip. Slowly, carefully, he unwound it. Beneath the folds gleamed a blade of black glass, edges jagged like obsidian flame, the same weapon that had once been called Chainbreaker's Bane. "It was forged to destroy your kind," he said, "to cut through any spell, any root, any god's will. But when I drew it against your forest, it turned in my hand. It's as if it remembers something it shouldn't." Neria touched the blade lightly. To her surprise, it trembled beneath her fingers, and the black glass rippled, showing faint shapes within, faces, roots, fire. "It remembers what it once was," she murmured. "This blade was born from a broken promise, a shard of a sword that should never have been made." The stranger's eyes widened. "Then it's true, the stories of Edric, of the Sword of Freedom." "They're not stories," Neria said. "They're seeds, and some still grow." The ground beneath them quivered. The air thickened with the scent of earth and rain. From the roots of the tree came a deep, slow rumble. The black blade shuddered in the man's hand. "Put it down," Nerya said quietly. He did. The sword fell to the soil, and the roots reached up, curling around it gently, drawing it down into the earth. Light spilled from the wound they left behind, gold and green, bright enough to blind. When it faded, the blade was gone. Only the roots remained, pulsing softly like veins of light. Nerya knelt beside them. "Rest," she whispered. "The time for war is over." The stranger sank to his knees beside her. "What happens now?" "Now," she said, "we remember." He looked up, his eyes bright with something like awe. "Then teach me." And so he stayed. Through the seasons that followed, the stranger, whose name was Alaric, learned the old ways, how to walk softly through the forest, how to listen to the ground, how to speak without words. He came to understand that the strength of the woods lay not in might, but in memory, and that every tree, every root, carried the story of those who had fought to keep them free. When the snows returned, he and Nerya stood together beneath the weirwood's red leaves. "The South will come again," he said. "Men always do." "Then we will teach them again," Nerya answered. "And again after that, until they learn." He smiled. "Do you think they ever will?" She looked to the horizon, where dawn touched the edge of the sky. "I think the roots have patience enough." Beneath their feet, deep in the earth, something vast stirred. A memory older than empires, older than men. It hummed softly, like the echo of a heartbeat. Not a sword, not a weapon, a promise. And the forest whispered, as it always had and always would. "The roots remember."